Welcome to another episode of the Country HQ Spotlight On podcast, where, as always, we're diving deep into the stories and the passions of the extraordinary individuals who make a mark in the country music world. Sometimes it's artists, sometimes it's fans, sometimes it's promoters, who knows? But today, we have a very special guest with us. Psychologist, author, and founder of the Australian Institute for Human Wellness, Anastasia Hronis, is our guest. Not only is she a renowned pianist and a mental health advocate, but for some reason she's also a fan of country music, and we're going to find out a little bit more about that. But also, we're going to talk about her latest venture. She's the visionary mind behind a fantastic fundraiser, Songs for the Skies, fundraising concert to be held for the Royal Flying Doctor Service, set to be a highlight of the Tamworth Country Music Festival in January 2025. So, no time like the present, let's dive into her journey, her love for all things music, especially country music, and her work on combining music and mental wellness. Anastasia, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for your time today.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
I want to ask not just about country music, but about music in general. When did music first become part of your life? When did it evolve into such a passion for you?
Yeah, I started playing the piano when I was 3 years old. My mum put me in piano lessons. She figured, you don't have anything else to do with a 3-year-old. Here you go. Take some lessons and start practicing. And just really from early on, I had a great teacher, but I really took a love to it from a young age. And then I guess by the time I was old enough to sort of make more of a decision for myself as to whether I wanted to continue playing piano or not, it was so much a part of my life that it just seemed like a no-brainer to keep going with it. And I really loved it. So I was trained classically. So most of my life played and practiced classical music.
And we were just saying off air before we started, I mean, you've played around the world, and I've seen you play both live and as well as on film. Your connection with that instrument, it's so remarkable. It's like you and that instrument become one. And I've seen that with pianists, I've seen it with guitarists and so on. But we were saying just before we came on to record, like I've now met and interviewed 3 people that have performed at Carnegie Hall, Willie Nelson, Emmylou Harris, and yourself. But how did that transition come to country music from those classical beginnings?
Yes. It wasn't until only sort of a few years ago that I guess discovered country music. It was classical sort of and mostly solo piano music for most of my life. As you said, 2015, I played Carnegie Hall, I'd played the Opera House, etc. But a friend of mine introduced me to the more sort of American pop country music to start off. And I took quite a liking to that and enjoyed it and found it really quite fun and accessible in many ways. And that is what started, I guess, my deep dive into country music, which then took me into sort of some of the older country music, our Aussie country music, and all sorts of more into blues as well. So it was a bit of a transition and journey for me.
Is that something you see, if I can put we'll take the cowgirl hat off and put the professional hat on. Is that something you see that, say, music, especially, not just country music in general, plays a significant part in our daily lives and our mental health and wellness?
Music absolutely can be so important for just general emotion regulation. It can be so influential in terms of changing our mood, but also there's, many times people will say, I felt sad and I listened to a sad song and that actually helped me feel better because it was something relatable. It was an opportunity for me to sort of sit in the discomfort or the painful emotion that I was experiencing in that moment to be able to kind of work through it and process through it. So music can be incredibly powerful for just helping us in our day-to-day emotional lives.
I remember years ago, many, many moons ago, I did some work with Neil Diamond and I was asking him about songwriting. And I said, Neil, do you have to be sad to write a sad song and happy and to write a happy song? And he told me he first thought that until he realized that, no, that wasn't the case, and it was actually the time he got divorced. And he said, well, I was married, I wrote songs about divorce. And then when I got divorced, I wrote songs about getting married again. But I think that's the interesting thing now where songwriting is such a diverse thing. We can also collaborate with people around the world, quite easily now through technology. So we can reach out and find different sources, different strengths, and different opportunities to not only listen to music, but also to use music as that healing tool as well.
Yes, absolutely.
We talk about reaching out, and you come up with this fantastic idea, the visionary behind Songs for the Skies. It's a fundraiser for Royal Flying Doctor Service. It's going to be held in January in Tamworth. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, when I was driving home from Tamworth this year, the 5-hour drive back to Sydney,
it's such a sad drive home, isn't it? We all get depressed.
It is the saddest of drives, I must say. Definitely. I was already thinking about Tamworth for the next year, and I guess my role. I've only been to two Tamworth so far, but I've loved them both, and was absolutely adamant that I was going to go back again next year. But thought about a way in which I might be able to do something a bit different. And I'm not necessarily a sort of solo artist in the country music scene. I wasn't necessarily going to put on a show that was mine per se. I'm involved in some other shows, but I thought it would be a great idea. I know there are some sort of charity events that go on, but to put on something that's a charity event for a service that services the country music, the country people of Australia, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I, for a long time, had been in awe of the work that the Royal Flying Doctors do. And I've actually this year had the opportunity to work with them a bit as well, which has been an incredible experience for me. So I thought, what better a time and place than Tamworth Country Music Festival than to put on a fundraising event for the Royal Flying Doctors service.
Give us a sneak peek, the lineup. Have we got some names we can announce yet?
We do have names. So we've got an excellent band and we've got some incredible artists who'll be performing. It's going to be a bit of a sort of a variety show in the sense that we have a number of different people coming on and doing different acts. So, and I also want to say that the artists are volunteering their time. Like, this is really an event that we're putting together, volunteering time to raise funds for the service. So the money really is going to the Royal Flying Doctors. So I'm super thankful. James Blundell, Tyler Rodriguez, Lauren Ryan, Loz Benson, Tane Rua, Alison Forbes, Brendan Narocki. We have an incredible lineup and they're all going to be coming and singing some of their own songs as well as some country classics. I'm going to be emceeing the event and really hoping to make it kind of fun. Really want to get some audience participation. There might even be a sing-along or two in there, but to really make it a fun and kind of family-friendly afternoon as well.
As long as Dorothy the Dinosaur and Big Strong John don't turn up. They turned up at the Golden Guitar nominations the other day, and that's one way to get me to leave a venue quick sticks.
Dorothy will not be there.
The Wiggles are coming to Tamworth in January 2025, but they won't be at the Songs for the Skies. So, what are some of the challenges that you've faced? This is you've been Tamworth twice. 2025 will be my 22nd. That gives you an insight as to how old I am. But what are some of the challenges that you've faced in putting this together?
Are we allowed to say that on air? Look, it's been a process. It's been a big undertaking. I haven't ever done something quite like this before, putting on a big show. I mean, the Tamworth Town Hall fits about 900 people, so I'm hoping to get 900 bums on seats if I can. Just I guess the organisational side of it has been a lot. Sort of, I've reached out to a lot of artists. Understandably, there are a lot of things going on at Tamworth, so it doesn't always work with people's schedules or the other shows that they have going on. So that's been understandable. But yeah, a lot of kind of reaching out, connecting with various people, asking them if they'd be willing to be involved in such a show. But yeah, the logistical side of things doesn't always come easily.
The reason I ask that is that gives you an insight as to what our artists have to go through every single day, every single week. Adam Harvey has the famous quote of, you all come to Tamworth once a year and we all love you. Because then I have to drive around the country the other 51 weeks of the year and try and find where the hell you went. I mean, it's a challenge musicians face, isn't it? They have social media. Most musicians have one, if not two, full-time jobs, and so on, or a full-time and a part-time job. The ABS said last year the average musician in Australia made, in New South Wales actually made about $18,000 from their music last year, and then averaged about $48,000 to $60,000. It's a challenge musicians have to face, isn't it? And is that something in which you think that there should be more of a focus on for not just we talk about financial support and subsidies, but also support for mental health for musicians?
Absolutely. It's musicians are not just musicians; they're managers and they're booking and they're doing the social media promo and they're their own marketing people. And I think there is so much that they have to do in order to I want to say be successful, but not even just be successful, what is success, but make enough of a living to be able to survive. And absolutely, in terms of the work, I've done some work with Support Act, and we do see that those financial pressures and the logistical pressures of how much they have to juggle really does impact a person's day-to-day mental health.
Yeah. I liken that, I think a lot of musicians don't really realise, or we as a community don't realise, some like the psychosocial hazards that musicians face, where it's like, traveling by yourself on the road, having to go to remote places, be away from your family and friends and so on, not knowing whether you're going to have 5 people turn up or 500. And I think that's what I try to say to a lot of musicians. I think you and I spoke about it a few months ago, saying, "Are you okay?" Day is fantastic, and a lot of musicians get behind that. But really, that question needs to be asked of our colleagues and our friends every day, and it's almost like another day is like, not okay day, but that's okay, because a lot of musicians, I was talking to a musician a few months ago, and the discussion took a really dark place, but thankfully he found songwriting to get out of that. And I was so relieved and so happy for him to find that pathway through his songwriting, and it just gave him that extra reason to perform and so on, especially when it's not so much competitive. I mean, country music's a fantastic family and it's thriving at the moment in Australia and around the world, but it can be competitive, and you're talking about things like awards and touring dates and vying for different spots and so on. So it's certainly a challenge. And I think I was talking to Michael Carpenter about it at the CMAA, and we've said, hey, this is a bigger discussion for a much larger platform. We could talk about it for days, but I want to talk about now is your fantastic book. You're the Dopamine Brain. You launched a few months ago, and I was fortunate enough to be there in Sydney. It focuses on human behavior and wellness and addiction and the concept of dopamine. And I've used it a lot, both in my personal and professional life as well. Do you see parallels between, say, the themes of your book and writing the book and some of these challenges we've talked about faced by musicians?
Yes. Absolutely. It's interesting. The first event we did after the book came out in September was actually up at Big Sound Festival, where I did a in-conversation session with King, who's a psychologist and musician with Support Act. And we were talking about, for example, kind of highs and lows that people and artists in the industry experience if you think about doing a great show or going on tour, and sort of like, I guess the dopamine highs and those really pleasurable and exciting moments that you experience, that's excellent. But then the kind of come down that comes after that as well. And being able to manage that can be really quite challenging. And I've heard a lot of artists sort of describe feeling like they're riding a bit of that roller coaster where when things feel great, they feel really great and they come off a show and they feel fantastic. And the high of that then can really quickly come down but feel really quite low afterwards as well.
Is that something that also then transfers to audiences? I mean, we're in a difficult, I suppose, economic period here in Australia. We've had interest rates, cost of living, you want to buy a carton of VB, now you've got to go and see a finance manager. But we're still seeing people coming out and spending money on their live entertainment. Pearl Jam were in Sydney over the weekend at $450 a ticket. Luke Combs has sold out a zillion tickets, Chris Stapleton. And the same thing happened after the Great Depression or during the Great Depression. People still found money for entertainment. How is the audience, how important from I suppose, performing artist point of view and a fan, how important is it that audiences still can connect to their artists during these challenging times?
Yeah, it's such a good point. People do find ways to connect with live music. And I think there is, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that recognition for people that live music does provide them with something, whether that be entertainment and joy, whether it be connection. I know many times I've gone to events and concerts on my own and just felt a sense of connection, sort of being in a room with people who obviously share some sort of similar passion to me. And there's something really quite nice about that. So I think people realize that there is so much to be gained emotionally from the experience of going and seeing live music, and to support artists that they perhaps have been following and supporting for some time. As you've said, it's not easy for artists. So I think once people get a bit of a glimpse behind the scenes as to what it takes to be a musician and the sort of challenges that are faced, people are perhaps more willing to go and buy that ticket and go support them live.
It's also important for fans out there, have a look at the work that things like Support Act do and so on, and see how they support your favourite musicians. And behind the scenes, I know one very, very high-profile musician you and I saw a few weeks ago. He's in a band that just celebrating a 50th anniversary. Behind the scenes, huge supporter of Support Act, both from a financial point of view and a support point of view, advocacy point of view. So if you're out there and you're a punter and you're worried about any musicians or you want to support them, have a look at Support Act and throw your support behind them as well, because just like the Royal Flying Doctor Service, who we're getting together for Songs for the Skies, other organisations like Support Act, even things like Music New South Wales, all very, very relevant in the day-to-day lives of this mistress we call music. Sure it is. I want to give you I haven't had a clinical psychologist on the show for a very long time, or ever, but I want to throw you one of those psych questions that I used to study. You're hosting your dinner. Okay, it's you and 6 other people, three musicians and 3 people from your professional psychology side of things. Who are you inviting to dinner?
Oh, what a question. Okay, I like this one. I like this. Music is like, I would think some of the old great classical composers. So huge fan of Chopin. This is my favorite composer. So I would be wanting to have dinner with Chopin, Rachmaninoff, and Liszt. They're my top 3 favorite classical composers. So
Okay.
I'm going to say them.
Yep. And good because all their music royalty free now too, so it just helps.
Yeah, pick their brains. How did they get to write such emotive music?
Yeah.
And then in the psych world, I'm going to say Aaron Beck. He is one of the kind of founders of cognitive behavior therapy. He has a daughter, Judith Beck, but I would say Aaron Beck. Would love to pick his brain. Who else? I mean, I'm very fortunate in that I do get to do a fair bit of travel in my psych work, and I meet a lot of influential people in the psychology world, which is incredible. You know who I'm going to say? Not quite psych related, but in a similar way. I actually met her last week very briefly, but Grace Tame, Australian of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in the work that she's been doing, so I would have her at the dinner table. And then the third person is Jonathan Haidt. So he wrote The Anxious Generation, which is a book that's been popular lately about sort of social media. His book's had a bit of, it's been positively received, but it's also received some criticism as well. So I'd be interested to kind of get his thoughts on some of those criticisms as well as what his research suggests.
And I'll come to that question in a second, but we're talking about a beautiful dinner. We're talking about maybe a souvlaki on the barbecue and some ouzo, and have a fantastic conversation there. It's funny, you talk about those musicians, you always find out different things. I read the other day, like Bernstein, for instance, only played the Black Keys. And I never knew that before as a composer. But I want to talk to you. That's interesting. You mentioned the social media, the addiction there and so on. We've just seen some recent changes with the legislation around, young people accessing social media and so on. But how important is it, or how scared do you get? Because I know you also do some work with addiction as well. How scared do you get sometimes when you see the onset of influences, the Andrew Tates, the other people we've just seen the US election, or as I call it, the Red Sea now in the United States and so on? Do you get concerned as a psychologist where you'd see the likes of these influencers have such I won't say positive or negative, but such an accessible reach that they can essentially reach any child, any teenager, any adult, and persuade them to behave or adapt to their lifestyle? Is that concerning for you? And have you seen that coming out in your field?
Yeah, it's such a interesting and big conversation, I think, because we've seen the rise of incels in recent years online, and I think sometimes quite extreme opinions, they're the ones that gain traction on social media, whether it's people supporting it or people fighting against it. They're the ones that get all the traction and get to the top of the news feeds, and that's what we see. This was one of the things with writing the Dopamine Brain, the book about science, what we saw with vaccines. When things are quite nuanced and complicated, it can be hard to explain that on social media in a way that makes sense to everyone who's on social media. And so we see these patterns of misinformation where things are overly simplified or kind of try to be simplified, but end up kind of giving quite an extreme perspective on something that isn't really quite true. But that's what the public latch onto. And I think there's a lot of danger in that.
It's a discussion I have often with my teenagers and my young adult children about, that especially now we've got the whole different islands and the different societies, and I'm not saying, I'm alluding to things here, and various celebrities who are now facing charges and so on and so forth. It must be such a challenging thing. I remember when I was a child, all you had to do was, my choices were Today FM and Triple M, and the loyalties were there, or Elvis versus the Beatles, and that was it, and so on. Whereas now, as members of the community, and both from a professional and a family points of view, we have to be so careful, don't we, about who we're letting into our phones and our TVs and our iPads. I think it's very scary, is not only the professional, I would imagine from your point of view, but also as a member of a family as well. It can be quite confronting sometimes.
Yeah.
Let's get away from the dark side of things. Let's get back to Songs for the Skies. We're going to head up to Tamworth. It's the Thursday the 23rd, is that right?
Yes, it is Thursday the 23rd, 1 till 3 o'clock. We've got a 2-hour show. The artists, as I mentioned, we've got an excellent band as well. We've got Loz Benson on drums, Sam Troy on pedal steel, I'll be on keys, Andy Morgan and Tommy Brooks are on guitar, Steph Cosentino's on bass, Gabby Louise
Wow.
on the fiddle, and even my mate Matt Lighty from up in Queensland, he's going to come play the didgeridoo for some of the songs. So
Fantastic.
yeah, it's going to be a great show.
If you haven't seen Anastasia play piano yet in a country vein, late at night especially, go and do it, okay? It was a highlight. I had one of those aha moments when we met at the press last year, or this year I should say,
Yeah.
and it's just like, okay, here's someone new, because Tamworth can be so repetitive. Then you meet someone new and then you find out not only are they an amazing musician, but they're an amazing person. So thank you for the time and the friendship we've developed and so on. I can't wait to see you perform again. We'll be there definitely. We're doing something special together behind the scenes for this as well to help raise funds. So there'll be more on that as we get a bit closer. But tickets are now on sale, guys. There's 900 seats. I want to see all 900 people there. So quick sticks, we're going to put the links in the show notes here. We're going to keep promoting. There's links on Country HQ, wherever you can do it. And Anastasia, yourself and the artists, if you want to get any of the artists on, we can talk about it. Give me a call. We'll gladly have them on and we'll promote the hell out of this for you. And help the Royal Flying Doctors Service Thursday, 23rd of January at the Tamworth Town Hall. And tickets are now on sale. Anastasia Hronis, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all you do as part of not just the music industry, but also the community, and voices and visions like yours for not only for these fundraisers, but also for the work you do in mental health. It's so important, especially in this day and age. So thank you for that. Thank you for the time and effort. And we look forward to seeing you in Tamworth.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks for all your support with this and promoting it. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in Tamworth.
900. Countdown's on.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining us today on the Country HQ Spotlight On podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends to keep listening to our next episode for the latest and greatest in country music from around the world.